Thank you for joining me. My name is Joanne Branch, and I'm a member of the COLBI family. I've been there for a little over a year now, but before that, I spent nearly 30 years in K-12 school procurement and construction delivery. So for that, I figured, well, let's share some best practices and start working together on learning a bit more about the nuances that we can use when hard bidding alternatives. Today, our COLBI presentation is going to be talking about the crazy construction cost increases and what some strategies are related to hard bidding. You know, our construction goes through a lot of cycles in California for the cost of construction, but there are some tools and tricks, especially if you're limited to doing only hard bids, that may have gone to the wayside over the years or we may have forgotten about. And we're going to talk about those methods based on the California Award of Contracts law. And that describes when you're using additive or deductive alternates and how to do that here in California. Our agenda today is we're going to talk just a smidge about the situation California puts K-12 school districts in when they're dealing with their construction, and looking at the California Award of Contracts law, as well as the blind bid process, which is something that may be an art that's lost, or some people may still use it a lot. But for those of you who aren't familiar with that, we'll go into that detail. And lastly, we'll end with how you can best fish for the best project you can get. So let's go ahead. So first we'll talk about the little bit of catch-22 we have. You know, this pandemic has made cost estimating a Vegas odds endeavor, and you're just rolling the dice when you're putting your plans out there. In good times, you can use alternates to get the biggest project you can afford. But in bad times and inflationary times, you use alternates to get the best project you can afford that still meets the minimum requirements of the fund sources. So in the case of state bond funds, the parameters of your grant agreement that you signed to get the money that helped you get the project done has some parameters to not reduce the size of the project or take certain things out of it, even if you are trying to fit it into a smaller budget on bid day. So we need to make sure what we do works within that parameter. The rules of school construction for state funding did not change, nor was it modified by anything the governor or the state of California has done to help us during this pandemic. Those rules are still there and they're still solid. So we have to get creative on our side. So you're doing the right thing now by listening to this presentation and dealing a little bit differently potentially with your next upcoming bid because of the economic unrest that we are going through right now and the tremendous escalation costs that we're seeing with certain things. And so it's important to do all we can to make ready. Now, briefly, there's so many presentations on alternative delivery methods. I will only say this one slide, and it's just to say that right now, if you've never tried alternative delivery methods such as lease-leaseback or design build, there's no better time to have the conversation if you're working towards designing a project coming up, because you have maximum price guarantees available through lease-leaseback and design build in California. Your cost estimates are being done by the people who are actually going to be mandated to deliver your project. And you can also get creative and include subcontractors early on in the design process if you want. Talk to your legal counsel. It is legal, believe it or not, particularly in design build. And they can help you talk about cost savings measures during the design that your architect alone may not know about or be able to come up with without their input. So that's the only reason I'm mentioning that. But you may be too far into design to shift to another method at this point. And local politics may totally preclude using something other than hard bid. So your architects can provide an opinion of cost, but then they charge extra if you want a third-party cost estimator more connected to today's market, the moment of the market, but they still provide no guarantee, nor can they. So hard bid does carry the most risk into the bid period. There are some limited strategies that we can help with by looking at the California Award of Contracts law. The beginning of the law starts with how a local agency has the right to use additive or deductive alternates. But it does specify that whenever you use them, well, you need to tell the bidder which one you're going to use. So which one of what? Well, that's what we're going to talk about now, is those options. At the end of the law, and I know I'm breaking it into the beginning and the end here, but at the end of the law, it also says nothing in the law precludes you from deciding, after you've decided who the low bidder is, to decide what your contract contents is going to be. They're actually two separate actions. You do one, decide who the low bidder is, then you do the other, decide what contract you want to write. So it's best done when you have the same group of people in the room with you when you're making the decisions about additive and deductive alternates. Go ahead and decide what you're going to award the contract for as well. It may or may not be the additive or deductive alternates you've based your low bidder on. So now let's go to the meat, the 4 options. Let's see what those are. The first option is lowest base bid. And it says that if you don't tell the bidders how you're going to base the lowest bidder selection, the law is going to revert you to the lowest base bid. That's it. So if you're silent, you're actually picking A, the lowest base bid. Item B, option B, is the award of contract is base plus pre-identified alternates. Okay, that means you have to decide before you put those bid documents on the street what the additive and deductive alternates, including in addition to the base bid, will be included to decide just the low bidder price. Again, that does not decide the scope of your contract. That decides who the low bidder is. That'll become clearer as I move into this scenario analysis. So let's take a look at a case study. Let's say we're going to go with base bid, and we have 4 alternates, and we have some allowance, and we can talk about, well, are we going to do the base bid plus the allowance? That's normal. Are we going to do the base bid plus alternates 2, 1, 4? What do we want? Well, whatever you decide, you need to pick one, be clear, and put it in writing. The basis of award for this bid is X. It's usually in the information for bidders. It's often on the bid form. Those are the 2 places contractors can look to typically find out what they need to know going into their cost estimating process. It'd be good to have a reason for why you've decided that, say, alternates 2 and 4 are the best way to determine price. Perhaps it's because of what they are. Perhaps it's because that's what you want to go fishing for, and you want the contractors to pay attention to 2 and 4 because you're more likely to award 2 and 4. I don't know, but whatever your reason is, it's good to know it going in. Now, once you decide that, you can't change your mind and redo your decision post-bid. Once you see the numbers, well, actually, once you publish your bid, it's done. So talking about the math, let's assume that we're going to take alternates 2 and 4 on this upcoming bid. Let's take a look at what it might look like. So the base bid is there on line 1, and you have contractor X and contractor Z. Now, because you've only selected 2 and 4, you're only going to look at base bid plus 2 and 4. Those items are in red. So when you add those up, if you take just the base bid, it would have been contractor X, but with alternates 2 and 4, it's contractor Z that is your low bidder. Let's talk a minute about labeling alternatives. You know, if you just use the term alternate, it can leave it up to the bidder to decide whether something's an additive or deductive alternate. If you say it's an additive alternate or you say it's a deductive alternate, it may or may not get confusing when they actually provide prices. I have had the experience where I called it an additive, and in fact, the contractor was trying to tell me it was a credit, and it was very confusing to understand the negative in front of a positive thing. Anyway, be careful how you word things, and be careful how you describe your alternates in your bid documents, your contract documents, plans, specifications. They should be very clear, circled. This is the alternate. This is the scope of the alternate. This is where the alternate starts and where the alternate stops. So after the bid and math is done and you have your low bidder, then you use that contractor's numbers to decide what you can afford to put in your contract. Take a look at contractor X here. That contractor was hungry and put in a very good bid on the base bid. But using type A method of the base bid only, they would have gotten the work. But because this team decided to put out there that 2 other items were very important, alternate 2 and alternate 4, contractor Z probably got a bit more serious on those 2 and ended up being the best value for what the district needed and wanted to do with their limited funds. Since alternate 2 came in closer to their estimated cost, they went ahead and got a bit more scope for this project. And you know what? They decided when they wrote the contract to go ahead and accept alternate 3 also. Now, they could have left alternate 2 off. Well, actually, they did leave one off. They left alternate 4 out of the scope and instead awarded alternate 3. That's fine as long as they stay with contractor Z, the low bidder based on what they said, base bid and alternates 2 and 4. The other thing looking at this is if alternate 2, should have been 40,000 plus, then maybe the district might hold off on any bells and whistles and not even award alternate 2, thinking that it's too low and it's too risky to award. So there are strategies when dealing with alternate bid and that analysis. All right. Option C, you receive the bids, then you announce the budget. You do not open bids until you've announced the goal budget. The goal budget is then used as you open the bids to determine the low bidder, and you can't rearrange the order of the alternates that you've listed. They're listed in the order in which they're important to you, okay? So it doesn't give you a lot of flexibility. You had to set that before you went to bid, and you need to tell them what that is. So let's see what it looks like. The law says you have to use the lowest total that are less than or equal to the disclosed budget. So when you're working your list, you would be writing down each item. So you have the base, additive 1, additive 2, deductive 3, that was the order decided. And when you get to the point where your budget, let's say that budget announced was 500,000, contractor A can go no further because the $52,000 alternate 4 would put them over the 500,000 limit. Contractor B, on the other hand, has a higher base bid, but they got a little more aggressive on a couple of other things, and you can get all the way through additive 4 with contractor B. So contractor B is the lowest bidder. Whatever you decide, be willing to do it the same way every time you use this method. Make sure that you decide that this is how we're going to run the list, meets the compliance with the law. And if you've never done this method before, you might want to talk to your legal counsel to make sure you're doing it just so, and that you don't, deviate from that. Again, if you want to award something smaller, you are still stuck with contractor B because the basis of identifying the low bidder was as you announced option C. But once you've found your low bidder, you don't have to award the entire contract to them. You can award whatever additive and deductive alternates you see fit. You just cannot award anything to contractor A. So this is the last option, which is a blind bid. So this is a bid where the people deciding about which alternates to include or exclude are blind to who the bidder is while determining the low bidder. This method allows decision makers to include alternates in any combination that gets them the best project they can afford. That's a lot of options. So let's take a closer look. The law is not specific as to exactly how you would prevent any information that would identify the bidder. And that's a quote from the law. Prevent any information that would identify the bidder. And no matter what you do, you could always be accused of something not being fail-safe. But here are 2 examples of the most common method we've seen in California schools to create an environment that complies with the intent of the law. So, single packet. Single packet is a normal bid packet is received by a person who's assigned to receive that bid packet and who will not be engaged in making any of the decisions. So he or she is able to open the bids, announce them as per the public bid law, but the decision makers cannot be in that room, cannot see or hear any of it, and they need to stay away. The person that opens the bid reviews the packets, decides that they put on a spreadsheet, and they go ahead and move that into where the decision makers, usually they're sitting in a separate room together. Sometimes it's the CM and the architect and maybe the assistant superintendent of business or someone, and they all get to go in and decide all this stuff. And they come out and the purchasing director tells them who the low bidder is after they've decided. So let's take 2-packet. The difference with 2-packet is it takes a bit more reliance on the bidders to read the instructions and put things in the right envelope. And so you need to do some specific work in advance because one envelope, well, here, let me show you. Two packet looks like this. One envelope with the price and no identification of who the bidder is gets in a little envelope there. So it's usually a bid form, and they don't sign it because that would tell you who they are, right? So you just got to have the price. So it has the base bid and all the alternates, and it's done. That's just the price. So then you have another envelope that's the price and the rest of the bid. The whole bid that you'd normally get in a one envelope is in there. And they take both of those and they stick them in a master envelope. Now that envelope cannot have any indication of who it is. So if you're going to be one of the people making the decision and you're getting this envelope and the person that walks in with it, you know they're with contractor XYZ. Now you know who that bidder is. And maybe you'll try to say it doesn't matter, but just be careful. The law, the intent of the law is that the person making the decisions or having any input or say on those decisions should not know who the bidder is for that analysis. And it's harder to instruct the bidders on how to do it because they have to make sure that they put the right thing in the right envelope. And, it's just a little more complicated. But let's see how it's worth it. Let's do the price analysis on one of these because it truly is the most flexible option. It just comes with heavier rules and regulations. All right, so again, we're with the open, decide, and then find out who it is. So note on this sheet, the bidder is not shown. The district chose not to use numbers either, like 1, 2, 3, because the person preparing the spreadsheet, if he or she received the envelope from a certain contractor, could say, oh, I'm going to put down as number 1, and then my boss will know. Just stay away from all that shenanigans. You need to be clean. So pink, yellow, purple, whatever you want to do, but make it very clear that they don't know and can't know who it is. So there's also a strategy when reviewing the blind bid spreadsheets. And folks who've done it many times learn these tricks, like looking for contractors who've provided generally fair pricing for all their alternates, or looking at the lowest base bid compared to the second low to see if there's a large spread, and then avoiding a bid that's too low or too high. And because they see all that, they'll work the numbers until they find a right price bidder using those alternates as tools to get the best project they can afford at the right price from the right firm. So do you take pink and get base and 1 and 3, or do you take yellow and the base plus 1, or purple and base plus 3? Well, that's up to you. Or, this yellow is offering $150,000 shade shelter. That's a great price. Well, maybe I should go to the board and ask for more money. I don't know where the money's going to come from, though. So I don't know. Well, maybe we'll just, we're just going to base the low bid on base bid plus alternate 1. All right, base bid plus alternate 1 it is. Once you decide, you take that and apply it to all the other bidders. You list them low to high as your final answer, sign off on it, and turn it in. And somebody else gets to open packet 2 and reveal who you got. Who'd you get? Let's take a look. Well, this is good. So now you know that pink was Smith & Sons, and yellow was Jones Construction, and purple was Outsider LLC. And you've listed them 1, 2, and 3. The column on the right, which is total base plus 1, is the one you use to report your low to high. It's no longer your base bid low to high. It's your award method low to high. Okay. So your lowest bidder is yellow, Jones Construction. So you can see that it's easier to just go with the base bid or, identify it some other way other than blind bid. But in the worst of economic times, it may be worth the effort to go through the process that you need to go through to have the most flexibility post-bid and get the best, biggest project you can afford at the time. If you'd done base bid as a base low bidder, what would you have ended up with in this case? Well, you would have ended up with contractor purple and a smaller project, but you never know until you see the prices. Upon the reveal, you find out that contractor purple happens to be your favorite local contractor, and yellow is from out of town and you've never heard of them. Maybe purple really sharpened her pencil to get the base bid perfect, but didn't spend as much effort on the alternates. You don't know why this happened. So can you change and just go with the low bid now? Oh, no. That's the way it is with hard bids. You get what you get when you work what you worked out, and it's based on the method you determine in advance. But with your awardee being an out-of-towner and an unknown, you could decide not to go ahead with that shade shelter add-on that you thought maybe you could get your board to fund, just in case the out-of-towner gets into a pickle. As a final side note, since the apparent low bidder could have issues when the second package is open, you may want to identify the contractor inclusion items for the contract for the second apparent low bidder as well, so that you can move forward with a contract that you can live with into your board action deadlines. So again, the basis of who's lowest and what you award their contract for are two separate steps. So now that we know the 4 options, what are some of the best practices that would create the ability to fish for the best project you can afford? So with hard bidding, you have these 4 options. Each one has its own proclivities, pros and cons, and makes a best fit under certain circumstances. So talking through these options as early as possible, once you've decided to do a hard price bid, is key to success, so that the plans and specifications and how you go to DSA is all aligned from the beginning. And it's easy for those contractors to parse out their estimates and get these alternates properly priced. It's not something you do by addendum at the last minute. It really isn't, but that's often what we see happening. It's not good practice. Remember, complexity for you may not always create a deep and wide pool, because complexity for the bidders is not fun at all. They basically have to separate out parts of the job into various pieces and parts and create complex calculations from them and their subcontractors to try to read your mind to see if they'll still be able to make the profit they need to make the project worth doing. Now let's talk a bit about deductive alternates. Deductive alternates may make them balk from submitting a bid in fear that you'll take all of them if you have a lot of them. And that'll cut the job down so much that they won't be able to make the goal profit they had set for doing the process of bidding this thing for you. If your additive alternates don't come with additional time to perform, also, they may not want to bid those either. So either take care to look at each one carefully and associate days with them, or allow on your bid form a place for them to write in days, either negative or positive, related to the scope of work being added or deleted. Other strategies is decide what is most important and where the project sits in this crazy situation of price fluctuations, and work to design what is truly the minimum scope and then what can be alternatives during bidding. The plans need to be clear and support the bid process well, so your bidders can locate and easily parse out that pricing and do it accurately. But if you select something that is required because of the basis of your state funding grant, you'll have to provide that scope somehow later, and it's always cheaper to do things now rather than later. So try to pick other things. Don't pick the minimum state scope to try to piece it out from your project. Deductives should be used sparingly, so mainly use them to protect you in a pinch from where you've underestimated the cost of the base bid work. They are very useful, particularly if you're going up against a tight delivery schedule and you have to award without rebidding anything. Well, that is a strategy for deductives. Contingencies can also be very helpful for you to get the right price in a time, especially like time of crisis now. They help your bidder understand you better. They help make sure that they understand that not all the risk is pushed onto them arbitrarily, because you actually have risk for unforeseens. You have risk if it rains. Do you want to prepay for potential rain, or do you want to actually pay for when it rains? So look at some allowances that can strategically align you so that you're not paying for things that may not occur. Owners who are not reasonable with change orders for unforeseen conditions tend to get higher bid prices overall than those who have a reputation of being reasonable and being fair. By showing bidders with these allowances that you realize you don't control the rain, that they can't avoid unforeseen conditions in areas that can't be seen before the bid, they will see that you are knowledgeable about construction and the realities of it, and that you have some budget set aside for reasonable risk, so they don't have to do that in their base bid. You can work your use of these allowances very tightly. You can have language mandating time, materials, detailed breakdown, even the fact that you don't pay overhead just because something changed, that your overhead can be based on time impacts and actual impacts of the additional work. So talk to your legal counsel about strategies that may help you and keep you safe from being taken advantage of. So depending on the political pressure of no change orders, it's a crazy position to take that there's not going to be a change order, but that 10% portion can be used strategically, a piece of it, to maybe add stuff back in during construction. So if you have a longer contract, like 12 months, maybe you have enough time to ask that contractor, if you like the way he's performing, to maybe add back in some things you couldn't award during the base bid. Now, the alternates are not valid a certain number of times through the contract, but you can still maybe use them as a basis to add some of that. The last bullet takes a lot of planning and finesse, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but you actually may be able to mitigate some risk by taking things to DSA during construction that are late adds that you want to add after you've awarded the contract. But work closely with your architect on making any of those types of decisions, and also be aware that if you don't have the item in the bid at the time you submit to OPSC for your work, you can't ask for additional grants or anything else associated with those costs. To wrap up, the faster you make a decision on how you're going to award and how you're going to do the project, the more successful you'll be. Engage your team. Select the best procurement method you can use early, and work with your team in an honest way. If you've engaged a leaseback or design build entity, work with them as part of a professional delivery team. They are professionals. Plan for the surprises. Don't be surprised. Keep it as simple as you can. Be as clear as you can, and use your legal counsel. If you've never used one of these methods before and now you're intrigued, please look to your peers and look to your legal counsel to learn these tools to be in your toolbox too. So thank you very much for coming on this bid alternatives journey with me. COLBI has an excellent product line that supports public capital facility program owners with the tools needed to do the tasks needed to deliver their projects. Accountability helps manage the accounting to ease that burden. Quality Bidders provides online pre-qualification services, and our new Secure Bids provides online bidding and other submissions with a specialty in blind bids. Just happens tangentially. So give us a call. Thank you. Bye.